Nothing gets my heart racing more than a cute girl that says, "I'll be your whetstone." Your blade is too dull. I'll be your whetstone. Yeah, episode 8 of Reign of the Spellblades, honestly, I'm very, very mixed on. Like, half this episode was really just kind of a setup of a guy that was full of himself, this Rossi guy, and it was kind of a, okay, here's the hot-headed dude that thinks that they're getting too much attention and he needs more attention. It did sort of imply a little bit that the guy was a good guy, but as per, it seems like most of the characters, or at least the villain characters of this series so far, I'm not too big on them. I think overall, with every single villain character we've had so far, it's always been a pretty big shrug. And I think that's probably its weakest point. Hopefully it gets better as the series goes on. They're doing a really good job of the main cast, for sure. I mean, Pete, and I love Shella. I think Nanao's got a lot of potential there. They did a really good job with Katie. Guy, we'll see eventually, hopefully. Oliver seems like he's a very complex character, even with this episode seemingly getting more development to him as a character. But the villains suck. And yes, a lot of them are kind of the Andrews kind of thing. Rossi is just exactly like Andrews. They seem like a bad person at first, and then it seems like there's some sort of thing underneath them that seems like it's a good person, and it's just very surface level for me. But that all aside, let's get into the episode proper, which pretty much is segmented into a few things here. We had, again, Rossi confronting them, saying they're standing out too much. Later on, he mentioned the idea that they stand out too much, and he wants to stand out, so he decides to pretty much create this big duel amongst all the first years, and to see who is the strongest. And it seems like everybody kind of just fed into his desire to have this big duel happen. I am really kind of curious as to how Rossi knew that he would get partnered up with Pete in a duel, because he said, "I'm going to run into you later, so be ready for that." And then, sure enough, Luther ends up pairing the two of them, which sort of implies this idea that he has insider knowledge, or maybe I don't think he knows the future. Maybe he had some sort of indication from Luther that that was going to be the thing. But again, like I said, there's that little bit inside there that does seem like, yes, Rossi could be trying to bait them into anger, and he knew that their weakest link was Pete. They all seem to kind of form around, yeah, I mean, you could argue it's Katie, technically, but Pete's the one that has the least experience in magic itself, so he's an easy target. And so maybe him targeting Pete was just to incite the rest of them. There's another side of it that, yes, there's a good aspect that kind of promotes Pete to want to get stronger. And that sort of leads into Shella and Oliver kind of helping him out. Which, yes, is sort of one of those kind of cheesy information dumps just right before we really get into talking about it. Let's be honest. You're bringing up suddenly, there's 3 schools, there's 3 basic schools, and they fight over which one's the best one. And then just so happens, later on, Oliver fights somebody that doesn't know any of the 3 basics and has his own style. It wasn't obvious at first, but there was an indication here that this was a lead-in. They wanted to establish that right here so that they could talk about it later on. But yeah, Pete aside, which again, I do really appreciate the idea of kind of getting Pete caught up on everything. And again, I'm surprised they didn't start getting into it yet, but yes, they technically need to start establishing how Pete can control his own reversey thing so that he can be able to use both male and female potentials. But it seemed like that sort of thing got, I mean, besides the fact that Rossi said something about you're the Hime of the group and you have to be protected, and that immediately threw off Pete, thinking, oh crap, how does he know? But it's kind of unfortunate that whole thing has kind of been just shifted off the side. We're not going to talk about that anymore. But yes, Rossi brings up the big duel thing. We immediately have a fight between Nanao and this fast talker. This girl that's known to being able to cast really, really fast. And yeah, she gets her butt kicked within a second by Nanao. Interesting thing that happened during this duel, though, that I noted is that, yes, Nanao did use that deflection that she learned, or at least she utilized before. When she was fighting Vera, she, at some point, deflected a spell. And I thought at that point, because she didn't look like she knew what she did, that it was this other side of her. Like, she has a split personality that kind of activates every now and then and does really crazy things. So my assumption at that point during the fight with Vera, that Nanao did that and would not know what she did. And it's going to be only something that she taps into whenever she has a split personality come forward. But again, it seems like this is something that's second nature to her now. She's learned it. Which does, yes, technically play into the idea that Nanao might actually know the Spellblade. She might not know what it is at the current moment, but she might be able to still use that without having to tap into this other personality. But yeah, there is a side that kind of makes you wonder, okay, why does this chick think that she's going to take on Nanao? Like, why do these people think, like, I'll take her out. She took down a Garuda, but whatever. But yes, Oliver gets an invitation to go meet up with Gwen and Shannon, and yes, along the way, ends up running into Ophelia Salvadori. She's still a special woman. The interesting thing that came from this is that, yeah, he was very cautious at first, but it seemed like she didn't want to fight. Like, she's like, no, I'm just chilling here. Do you want to talk? Can we talk? A nice different perspective of this lady, because our first impressions of her was not good. The chick was crazy, birthing demons and stuff. But now it just seems like we got a little bit of an insight into, I guess, her as a human. My mindset that has been around, especially her and Cirrus, is that they seem like they're a bit crazy. Like, have they gotten too close to the spell and they're about to be consumed, but they're not quite gonna, they've maybe stabilized themselves. Like, they're right at the edge, but they're not gonna go over the cliff. But she seemed pretty normal, and to get a little bit insight into what seems like this past of people that were kind of similar to, Oliver and everybody else, does technically humanize her a bit more. That, yeah, there was a history between her, Carlos, and Godfrey. They used to be friends. They used to hang out. They used to go on adventures just like Oliver, which, yes, is kind of counter to what I thought, which was Godfrey and Carlos not being too friendly with Ophelia, but it seemed like they used to be friends. I've always liked these kind of parallels that are drawn through generations. This idea that, there's not a massive age gap here. We're not talking about father-son here, but there is a bit of a year's difference here, and still seeing that they kind of are acting the same way. But, of course, the other big juicy detail kind of sprinkled in here is that, yes, Ophelia tells Oliver, you might want to stay away for a while. Like, stay up there in the school for a while. Don't be coming down here, at least not for the next month. So Ophelia is sort of implying that something's going to happen within this next month. There's going to be a battle or something that's going to be happening, and she seems to have taken a liking to Oliver, and so she's warning him, don't come down here. Like, stop coming down here. So I'll be interested to see what that is, and if that sort of does link into what happens at the end of the episode, where it does look like Rossi is confronted by somebody that I thought was Cirrus at first, but Cirrus doesn't have, like, the red in the front. So somebody else possibly taking down Rossi, and is it involved with what she's saying? There's something happening down there. Which, yes, technically the title of the next episode sort of implies that they're not going to stay away from the labyrinth. But yes, then we have the meeting with Gwen and Shannon. There's a few important takeaways from this little segment, and that is, one, that Shannon and Gwen knew Ophelia. Specifically, Shannon seems to care for Ophelia. Says that she does have a nickname for her, calls her Leah. Specifically, that Shannon says that she is a type that gets lonely easy. And she wanted to go chase after Ophelia. So it seems like she's looking for her and wants to help her out. So there's a bond here, which is kind of interesting, that we might get into later on. But additionally, yes, it seems like there's a lot of implications here that, yeah, they all recognize that people are drawn to Nanao. There's a charm about her. She has potential. She does have the Spellblade, it seems like. And additionally, yes, she has Mother's Broom. And what was kind of odd about this whole conversation is that Gwen says something to the effect of, feeling of being drawn to something is important to a mage, that Nanao will be somebody that's likely to change the very essence of you. Leave that feeling that you can't express within your heart, and be yourself, and be loyal to your friends in your own way. I might be drawing weird conclusions here, but it almost feels like Gwen is equating it to the spell. As we always kind of mention, this idea, the spell is something that people are drawn to, some people get consumed by it, and some people master it. And almost kind of implying this idea of being drawn to her is almost like that element. Don't get lost in it, but just support her in your own way. Don't be what you think you should be, just be who you are, which is, yes, honestly important. But yes, the other thing that was revealed here is that Gwen just knows Carlos from a long time ago, which again is implied in the idea that Shannon knows Ophelia. These people are all seemingly connected. But yes, as Oliver is leaving, he has his fight with Rossi, and yeah, it's sort of implied here that Oliver kind of was losing, obviously. He was getting his butt kicked. And a lot of that seems to be because Oliver, on one hand, did not take his foe seriously. He was being very careless. But additionally, the idea that Oliver was relying too much on his training, and thus having somebody that he's fighting that is not of the basic styles. This guy has his own talent. He fights dirty. He just uses whatever he has with him. Seems like he's self-trained. So there is like this combat between both essentially well-trained to untrained. Oliver still ends up winning in the end because, one, he's the main character, but two, he's acknowledging at the very end that there is limits to what Rossi is doing. But additionally, it kind of comes this understanding moment where Oliver's telling him, look, I'm jealous of you because you have your own talent. But he also tells him you need to make sure that you train one of the basics because you're going to meet a limit. There's only so far your own talent can take you. You need to hone your skill. But Rase also mentions the idea that Oliver is like so by the book. Like how somebody can be so well trained in all those things and not really bend from it. Which again might be a big growing point for Oliver as a character, is to learn that he can break from those strict trainings. But it may also apply to what makes Oliver special. I think they've kind of implied it several times throughout the series that Oliver is just really good at learning things. Like he picks up things very quickly. And that could make sense that he does have a mastery in all the arts itself, but that's also made him kind of rigid. But it's a nice little wake-up call for him. As he's talking to Karst later on, he's realizing, yeah, I got careless. I just realized that I have a lot to grow. I am not at my peak potential because I just got my butt kicked by somebody that he deemed unworthy of him. He deemed Rose as less than him because, again, Rose doesn't really have any sort of training. So it's a good growing point. But additionally, Karst here is sort of implying, which shock to nobody, this idea that Oliver is this deadly being. Like, Karst says, that night that I seen you fight, which I'm not sure if she's implying when he beat Darius, or if there was another night that she experienced something within Oliver. This idea that Oliver is this bloodthirsty person, and that, yes, his blade has dulled. He's becoming too kind. And thus, yes, somebody like Rose gives him a hard time because he's not fighting with his peak potential. He is being too kind. And so her idea is, yes, like the joke implies, make me be your whetstone. You can kill me, and if that will unlock your full potential, I would be a willing sacrifice to you if you so wish it. Which is, yes, on one hand, very tragic. This girl thinks that that's something that's worth doing, but at the same time, she's serving Oliver, so this is something that she would feel very honored to do. But additionally, she gets all doki doki, which throws her off because he's like, you're blushing. When you're saying all that, you're blushing. Again, there's a lot of things that we can imply. We can imply a lot of things in this scene. Let me be your whetstone. You're tooth sheathed. Unsheathe your sword and undolify it with me. It's like, holy crap, what are we talking about here? Are we making innuendos here? Are we getting hot and bothered? Are we doing like an honorable sacrifice, or are we just talking about his ability to fight? I don't know. It was cute. It's funny. We'll go with it. But yeah, this all wraps up with Rossi bumping into somebody, which I thought was Cirrus, but it's not Cirrus. I don't think so. And he wants his medal. So they're going to fight. And it didn't seem like they were doing the enchant for the non-lethal, so I'm guessing they're going to fight to death. So that, again, could probably turn into something next episode. But yeah, like I said, very, very mixed episode. Again, a lot of the stuff around Rossi, even though it kind of turned into something interesting later on, was a little bit let down. But at the same time, a lot of development for Pete, and Oliver getting a little bit of a wake-up call, which is always good. So we'll see where it goes from here, but that's my thoughts on episode 8 of Reign of Seven Spellblades. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. As always, if you did, make sure to hit that like button down below, comment, let me know what's thought of the episode. Additionally, if you're new to the channel, make sure that subscribe button to get on my content. I do news, reviews, first impressions, top list. If it's anime, it's pretty much here. Additionally, if you like this content and you want to support more, I have a Patreon link, tips link, super thanks, membership button down below. Greatly appreciate what it does, and y'all take care.